Now recording. So, how is everybody today? This fine Monday morning? Ready to go, go, go? Yay. So, let's see. When was our midterm again? It's a good question, eh? Let's see here. Midterm. This says Wednesday, March 9th. So like in a month. Okay. Midterms in about a month. Probably have it during class, which would be like the 10th, I guess. March 10th? Yeah, that's like a little close to exams. It's like a late midterm question. Actually, in this case, I haven't decided yet. My inclination is for paper testing, but you know, we'll see how it goes. Basically, if I have time, then it will be, and if not, then it won't be. Okay. So, let's take a look at this week's module. This is actually week 5, despite the fact that we're on week 4, so. Okay. So, having examined JavaScript in its basic and most elementary forms, we will now study JQuery, which is a mechanism for improving the speed with which we can write JavaScript. So JQuery is what's known as a front-end framework. The purpose of JQuery is to replace a number of JavaScript things that you would do in JavaScript using somewhat more expanded notation and contracting it down so that it takes much less time and energy to do the same work. So JavaScript can be extended with libraries and frameworks that make common tasks easier. This makes development time shorter and code easier to understand. In theory, if you're familiar with the framework, that is. This can also help with browser cross-compatibility as well. Now, JQuery is getting a little up there. It's largely it's kind of in the process of falling out of favor at the moment. What's kind of happened, JQuery was very popular for a period of time, but over time, the most popular features in jQuery have slowly been added to the base language of JavaScript, so that over time it has somewhat impoverished jQuery of the nice, useful features that it originally, originally that was its selling point, right? That being said, the number of websites which use jQuery is still increasing. So, jQuery was written and released in 2006 by John Resig. It is primarily a library for manipulating the document object model. You remember the document object model that we were talking about last time? Can anybody tell me what the document object model is? Even a rough one? Yes?
I drew a table that outlines documents and then the root elements, and two elements to the side. That would mean that this is kind of it's kind of like an order in which things are executed.
So, the document object model, it's a fairly fundamental concept, so let's go through it again. The idea with the document object model is that we take the website and everything that's in it, and we organize it into a formal software hierarchy. So, for example, our HTML element, which contains both the head and the body, actually does have as child elements head and body. The HTML element, where we set the title of the web page, that is the title in the browser tab, that is a sub-element of the head, right? So it's a sub-element of the head. Under body, we might have some headers, a div containing 2 paragraphs, and an image. This one might have a span element. So essentially, what the document object model does is it recognizes the parent-child relationships that already exist inside of the HTML file, right? When a thing contains other things, that makes it the parent. When a thing is contained by one other thing, that makes it that thing's parent, right? All elements in the DOM have at most, or except for the root node, have at exactly one parent. But a parent may have as many children as you like. Does that make sense? So it's a tree structure. When we say document object model, it means that we are modeling the document as an object in the object-oriented programming sense. Yes?
So this goes for every language? Let's say C#?
Oh, no, this is specifically for HTML. This doesn't even apply for CSS, just HTML. Yeah. Now, in other programming languages, you can produce a hierarchy of classes which do this same work, right? If we wanted to, we could, in C#, we could say, class HTML has a public head, which is H public body B, right? Methods, etc. You could define it that way, make these things sub-elements of a class in an object-oriented sense, And in fact, that's what JavaScript is doing in the background, right? But for our purposes, all we have to do is imagine the document as this hierarchical structure, understand this structure can be navigated, right? So, pardon me. Yes, the professor is still dying. So, what do we mean then when we say document object model manipulation? It's not too bad a concept. Basically, the idea is this thing exists and is produced by the browser. The way that JavaScript works, largely, is to modify the properties of these elements. That is DOM manipulation. Modifying the properties of elements of the DOM. Right? So, for example, if I were to take the inner HTML of this paragraph and change it so that it says butts, that would be DOM manipulation, right? If I made this heading say hello world or turned it green, that would be DOM manipulation. Make sense? Question?
So you'll do that on the assignment, change one heading to a different color?
If you've done it with CSS, then no. So it's a little like CSS is a bit more indirect. When you write a CSS rule, it's like a passive thing. You're saying, okay, browser, I want you to implement these rules, but I don't care when, how, or in what order you do it, so long as I get the effect that I want, right? With JavaScript, you are literally saying, I want this piece of code to do this at precisely that time, right? It's direct manipulation as opposed to setting up a passive rule. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So what if you did style, is that style under the record?
So again, it depends on if you're doing JavaScript or CSS.
Like I styled my table in HTML for the assignment.
For assignment 1, then that's passive CSS mode.
Put it in HTML side.
Well, pardon me. Yeah, but it's still, you're still like, when we talk about style properties, we're generally talking about CSS properties, even if we're using inline style tags. Excellent questions. Any more questions about any of this? So, having defined DOM manipulation, JQuery is a library to help us handle those that type of operation. So, it allows us to find, select, and manipulate DOM elements with a compact CSS style syntax. It allows us to chain actions together on selected DOM elements, so we can do action chaining. It allows us to easily add event handlers to DOM elements, and we can also use it to perform AJAX requests slightly more easily than we could otherwise. Don't worry, we will have plenty of material on AJAX requests coming up. So, isn't jQuery getting a bit on? It's not the cool kid on the block anymore. Some features, like AJAX, are now easier in native JavaScript. DOM manipulation is increasingly, quote, not how things are done. That is to say, much of the time now, the website will come with these types of manipulations pre-baked from the server. Yet, it is still the most used front-end library, and even as of, well, the year this was written, it's only getting more popular. So, you can see that JQuery is on 70 million websites. React, it'd be interesting to see an updated version of this actually. 500,000. And React is like, it is the big cheese at the moment. Let me see if I can get an updated version of this website though. That would be very interesting.
Big cheese in like the good way, or?
I always think that cheese is good, so being the cheese must also be good, right? Although I think people use it to mean cheesing the system.
Yeah, that's what I like cheesing the video game.
Yeah.
Cheating.
Yes, not all of my hip internet lingo is. Give me a break, I'm old, you know. Does this thing even exist? Doesn't seem so. All right. Well, that's a dead website. All right. That's okay. So, this data is from about 4 years ago now. So, anyway. It's in the curriculum, so I'm teaching it. And it does make your life easier. We can download jQuery from a website like jQuery.com or from another source like Google. We will get a file like jQuery-3-2, something like this, jQuery version code .min.js. We'll need to include that script in our page, and then we have jQuery available to us. You can also get it from Google directly, but I think it's slightly instructive to actually take a look at like the jQuery min.js file and see what it looks like. So a min file, that stands for minimized. So essentially what they've done, they've taken the source code, made it as small as humanly possible, right? By removing characters.
You mean the images by source?
I mean like the actual file size has been reduced to be as small as possible. This is primarily to reduce network traffic, right? It makes it somewhat interesting to look at. jQuery, there we go. Download. Latest version, download. Oh. There you have it. This is the jQuery library. You copy it. There you go. Or I think you can actually just save it. Yeah. Save. Documents, my websites. So you can recognize this top thing as a comment. You can definitely recognize programming code-ish things here. You know, you've got the word function occurring, function, return, break, math.random, you know. This is programming code, but it's been squashed. All of the white space has been removed, right? A lot of work went into this. I hope you appreciate it. But yeah, you don't have to know how it works, just that it works. So let's also, while we're here, I need a code editor. Please fire up your favorite code editor. Yeah. There we go. I think I'll try VS Code today. But yes, so the process, once again, for downloading jQuery, you go to jQuery.com. You click download. You then click download jQuery 3.7.1. You get this file, and from here you just Control-S, save it to your local file system, whichever folder you're building your website in. Sound good? There we go. I'm also going to make an HTML file, index.html. Running file create participants, you say. Perhaps you could just work VS Code. It's not difficult to create a file, VS Code. Good grief. So, let's now include our Emmet abbreviation, exclamation point. Oh, yeah, Emmet abbreviations aren't working either. Huh. Then what is even the point of you? I might as well be using Notepad++. Microsoft. Here's a question. What would be better programmers? Everybody at Microsoft? Or a tin pail full of cuttlefish? I would put my money on the cuttlefish. Those are very intelligent animals. So, we'll do things the old-fashioned way. There we go. HTML, head, and body. So, the thing that we now need to do is to import our JQuery script file. Recalling how to include a JavaScript source code file from last week, we start with the script tag. It is necessary to close it as well. Script. We then include src for source and the name of the file we are including. In our case, that will be jQuery dash 3.7.1.min.js. Again, don't be fooled by the fact that Windows will hide your file extensions by default. Because you have to know the file extension over here. Sound good? Very good. Now, we need to give the website a little bit of content. Baby's first jQuery. Query. If there's one thing I love to do, it's to go to Wikipedia page as Wikipedia's page of the day and steal a couple of paragraphs. Today's featured article is Untitled Goose Game. Wow. Interesting. Wow, that game came out like over 5 years ago now. That's crazy. All right. Humorous in-game scenarios. I wonder if sales go up since they're the featured Wikipedia article. And then, of course, in the following years, we had Untitled Duck Game, Untitled Turkey Game, Untitled Buzzard Game, because that's how the games industry works, right? Okay. So, let's take a look at our website. So we go. Good. We need to know how to actually do the jQuery, though, before we go much further. So, jQuery works with selectors and actions. The core syntax, we have a $, In braces, we have a selector. Then we perform an action on that selector. $sign is the quote JQuery function, although once we hit PHP, you will see that $sign is used in similar contexts for other stuff as well. Selectors select elements to perform an action to, and an action is some function that occurs to the elements. For example, p.hide would hide all p elements on the page. myClass.hide would hide all elements with the class myClass. So let's try that out. You'll notice that this is a CSS selector. It is a CSS selector the same way that we've been writing selectors for CSS rules, the same way that we used query selector last week to grab elements, references to DOM elements. So, let's try her out, shall we? I'm going to create a new script element, myscript.js. There we go. And to the contents, well, let me save it first. There we go. myscript.js. There we go. myscript.js. By the way, when I did that, I had to uncheck a checkbox called append extension. Let me show you again. Very sneaky. Save as type, and it gives you a whole bunch of file types. Append extension. If that is checked, then it will add whatever file extension it finds in this list, which is probably not desirable. It will change the file name and render the connection to the JavaScript broken. Question?
We don't have to do that in the other app, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah, just
No. Yeah. There we go. So, jQuery p dot hide. Reloading the page. Oh boy. Did I do it correctly? Let's try it in console then. Did I get all of the references? Looks like I did. There we go. Oh, I know. Ah. I know what the issue is. I have run afoul of something rather silly. Something rather silly indeed. So, the browser executes JavaScript as it encounters it, right? when I was attempting to hide the paragraphs on line 4, I had only loaded the page up to line 4, which means that the paragraphs on lines 9, 11, and 13 had not actually been loaded into the browser yet. So I was hiding things which did not exist. Now, there are a couple of ways of fixing this. The easiest way is to just move this script element to the bottom of the page, like that. If I do that, you can see the paragraphs do not appear. What goes on? The browser loads lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Then, when it gets to line 15, it executes myscript.js, gather all references to p elements, 1, 2, 3, hide, they get hidden. It's manipulating the DOM after the DOM has been loaded. Question?
What's the point of hiding paragraphs?
Oh, just to demonstrate that jQuery works at the moment.
I did it the same way, but still shows wrong.
Show me your HTML again, please. Ah, well, you're not loading the jQuery library. That's not the jQuery library. That's our own script. So you need to put, you see my line 3? You need to put that
Oh,
in
I
there.
thought I was just
Yeah. No, it has to be actually manually loaded. Anybody else having trouble? Oh, you're missing round braces. Right there. Which means you're referencing the function but not actually calling it. Did you get it working? Good. Did you guys get it working? Good, good, good. Still not working? SRC, not SCR. Source. Boop. That's programming. So, good. So, any questions about that? So far, so good? Wonderful. Pardon me. So, selectors generally follow CSS syntax, so there's not much new here. IDs use the octo-fork character, classes use the period character, and elements, just plain old elements, require no character. Recall also that you can chain these guys together. We can also add event handlers to elements using JQuery. This is the same thing that we were doing with onClick last week, the onClick attribute in HTML, right? Essentially the same thing. So if we call the click function, give that a reference to a function, then we add myfunc as the click event handler for all p tags. And you can see that that's already much faster and easier than having to go into every single element on the HTML page and doing that individually to each one of them, right? All once. You can also define anonymous functions in place, although I don't necessarily recommend that until you're a little bit more familiar with how the system works. Other event handlers include double click, that's double, there's supposed to be an L there, pretty sure. Mouse leave, mouse enter, hover, etc. Make sense? So let's try an example of setting up some click events. So, let's say that we want to write some JavaScript such that if we click on the header will turn red or green, depending on whether it's green or red, right? So whatever its initial color is, it'll turn red, and then after that, it'll toggle between green and red. Sound good? So we need to write a function, toggle color, next we grab a reference to the H2 element. On click, there we go. We add toggle color. Now, very important point. Notice that I am not including two round braces after this function name. In JavaScript, if you include the round braces after the function name, you have called the function. In this case, we don't want to call the function yet. We're trying to set the function to be called in the future. So, we do not provide the round braces, right? Another way to say this is that we are working with the function as a reference to a function rather than immediately calling the function. Now, just to make sure everything is working, console.log test. There we go. And I think I'm going to stop hiding the paragraphs. There we go. So, clicking, test. There we go. Clicking on the heading works. Hooray! So, I'll give you guys a quick minute to get that much working, right? she's got a full head of hair, eh?
Her father and her oldest brother have beautiful hair. Thick and wavy. He was born with a full head of hair also.
All mine have been hairy so far, which is hilarious because I was bald as a cucumber.
Okay, from the wife then.
Yep.
I can't believe that she's still as brunette as she is. Almost everybody in my families, at least as children, were blonde, except for my one aunt who was born with black hair and had still to this day black hair. And I think it could still lighten up, but I think she somehow got that one gene.
Well, genetics are funny. Did you get it working? Working? Working. There you go. No, you gotta put it at the bottom. Well, maybe it should make it more place, but reload. There you go. Did you get it working? So, go to your JavaScript console. Right click. Inspect at the bottom. Console. I mean, I don't know what the regular value is. Give me 1 second. Can I see your HTML? Type device dash width.
Here.
Nope. Width is equal to device dash width. Dash and slash. Dash. Right, now try clicking on the header. There you go. Working. You got it working, right? Good. So now, I've skipped ahead in the slides a couple of ticks to show you this guy. One of the actions that you can perform is CSS. This applies a new styling rule to whatever it is you selected with the selector. So we can use .css to modify the color of our thing, of our heading. So we select h2 .css color red. Now rather than typing the word test several times, if we click on the header, we turn it red. Very good. Now, as a quick little programming exercise, I would like you to put in the code that toggles it between red and green. Okay? And I'll give you a bit of a hint. That is how you read the current color. It won't give you the, it won't say red, unfortunately, but, you know, R for the R channel turned up to 255, which is its maximum value, is how the software defines red. So, that is how you can determine what the current color is. I'll write that on the board. And I'll put the rest of the code on the board as well. And then you guys can write a little bit of code that toggles. H2 dot CSS at color. There is your code. Is everybody in the room, like, aware of the definition of the word toggle? Because occasionally I have students who don't know what toggle means.
Not so sure what does it mean.
So, this is a toggle switch, right? Basically, you're switching between two states, right? So what a toggle operation in computers means, if you activate a toggle switch and it's on, you turn it off. If it's off, you turn it on, right? You're just flipping the switch. Make sense? Cool.
What was the question again? You wanted to change between two colors?
Yeah, if it's red, turn it green. If it's green, turn it red. But it'll start off as black. So there's an added complication for you. return the current state color. You'll need to run a braces to put it inside first. So, yeah. Yes. Those. Now, what you do is you go in and see, like you enter that query on the web page, see what gives you as a result, stick that in that as the part of comparison. So, now, enter that same thing. So that is the script, the whole thing. Okay? So you take that and integrate that into your statement, and you'll have made some progress. No. For one thing, we're not using jQuery.
So,
For two, that code is not being called. So even if it was doing anything, you would never know. Number three, we're using color, not background color.
now what did you do?
I mean, it would, as it's not, right, property at least. But in general, it's not like the right idea. Did you get it working? Yeah, you're missing an if statement. Yes. You crazy kids figure it out? No? Okay, first, the problem is there. Use that bit of code that I put on the board. Here, let me show you something. You go to your console and you type that what I put on the board there. checking for that string. Yeah. Can I save it? Save it, Murray? It might be. Oh. Is it RBG or RGB?
No, I didn't. Okay. That's what I should do.
Ah. I found it.
That's it, telling you this stuff.
Yeah.
That too clear? Clear colors.
Okay. I'm gonna do it on the board. See if I can do better walk.
It'll probably be like the smallest little grammar or something that I missed, and I'll see if the instructor will take it out.
Welcome to JavaScript. Yeah. So this will produce the current color of the yes, of the heading. Sorry. I seem a little bit out of it today. The baby had us up late last night with teething, so not that that's an excuse. h2.css add color. So the way I recommend it is to take a look at the page itself, see what this returns. The other thing is, because this is a string, if you put spaces, if you didn't put spaces in here, that might also be screwing it up. So I'm just going to copy this string precisely. If this thing is RGB 255.00, that means it's red. If it's red, we want to turn it green. Green, there we go. Otherwise, we want to turn it red. There we go. Save, save, save. Now let's test her out, shall we? Click and it's red, click and it's green. Except it also, so it does work. It was the spaces? Isn't it a lovely language? Doesn't that make a lot of sense? Yeah. Ugh. And of course, it didn't tell you there was an error or anything. It just didn't work. It's almost as if it would be useful if there was some kind of class that would define these variables, maybe even define an equality method to determine when colors are equal to each other, so that we could call that method instead of having to hack this together by comparing strings that, you know, this really wasn't meant for what it's doing. But that works. Any questions? Give you guys a minute to get that down. There. There. Yes. Added an extra period. So modifying CSS properties is good and useful. Let's take a look at some of the other sorts of things. And also, let's discuss that problem we were having earlier with the page not having been loaded before we started manipulating things. So, our chosen solution to the problem we were having where my script was loading and executing before the paragraphs were loaded, so hiding them wasn't working. Our chosen solution to that was to move the script tag to the last line of the file so that it gets loaded after everything else gets loaded too. It works, but it's not ideal. In general, the head is where we do all of our file imports. We want to keep things that way, right? So that we always know where to find everything. So there are ways around that problem. The most effective is to define any function or define any behavior that happens automatically as happening when the document is ready. Right? So we grab a reference to the document. .ready allows us to set an event for when the document has been fully loaded. Then and only then we execute a function. In this case, it's an anonymous function. And I suppose now is as good a time as any to see how anonymous functions work. So an anonymous function, well, okay, what's an anonymous person?
Don't know.
You don't know who they are. Why? What information don't we have about them?
Name.
Their identity or their name, right? So an anonymous person is a person with no name, or at least no real name, right? An anonymous function is a function that has no name. It is defined in place. It is used in place. There is no way to refer to it outside of the place where it is. They are generally single-use functions that you simply spin up, pop up, somewhere that you expect a function reference, and then you provide it and you're off to the races. So, the particular line that we had problems with was p.hide. Going back to our old busted version, you can see that while I'm trying to hide these paragraphs, I am not able to. Again, the line of code, there we go. The line of code where p.hide exists is line 1 in the file myscript.js, right? myscript.js is loaded on line 4. When we're on line 4, we've only seen the file up to line 4. We have not loaded this paragraph on line 9, this on line 11, or this on line 13. We have simply not loaded those into memory yet. So, trying to operate on things that are not loaded into memory is bound to fail. But, if we take this and put it inside of document ready, document.ready function, there we go. Save that, reload, and the text disappears. In this case now, document.ready sets up a different type of event handler. This one fires only once, and then only when the page has been loaded, fully loaded. It has reached the end. All items are now in the browser. When that happens, it runs this function. This function on line 2 gathers all references to paragraphs, which are loaded and exist now, and then it hides them. So we see the effect. Does that make sense? Question?
You said that it's all JavaScript that runs kind of like as soon as it pops up in our code, but when we were doing JavaScript last week, we put it up at the top of the page without any problems. Is that because of what we were doing? Like if we had tried to do something else, would it have given us a problem?
That's correct. It's because of what we were doing. So if you take a look at everything past line 4 here, right? Well, in this case, this would also not work because we would not, like on this line, we're hooking H2 up to the click event. If H2 is not loaded, we can't do that. What we were doing previously, our previous approach, we had a button, right? And we said on click equals function foo. Right? So we can do this whether or not the JavaScript is actually loaded. We can set that function reference, and then the JavaScript, when it loads everything in, it will either define foo or not. If it defines it, then this is a link to it. If it doesn't define it, then that is a dead link to a function that doesn't exist and will cause a console error if you try to click it. But the issue, like the thing is, this is loaded as the DOM is loaded, right? When we reach this stage in the file, we load the button plus it's on click event, so it's linked at that time, right? And secondly, in those examples, we didn't have any code that just fired. everything was wrapped inside of functions, right? So we weren't expecting any effects just from loading the JavaScript, right? We had no lines like this in there, we had no lines like that in there. Things that are just meant to fire up and do something. Everything was function definitions, so everything was waiting to be triggered. When you set the code as waiting to be triggered, those triggers, especially if they're coming from a user, will always only come after the page is loaded anyways, right? The user can't really trigger a click event until the page is loaded, right? So we got around this problem last week by making it so that all functions would be run after the page was loaded anyways, because they were all tied to user events. Does that make sense? So you do occasionally want the JavaScript to do something all by itself, and that's how you get it to do it. I know that this is kind of a bit of a subtle point. I hope everybody is following this, because this is absolutely pertinent to assignment 2. Question?
Why doesn't everybody just put the link to the JavaScript at the bottom of the page?
Because it's supposed to go up here. I know. Because, like, if you're inconsistent about where you put stuff like that, people won't find it when they're looking for it, right? Like, it's a very old convention in programming languages. When you import something, you do so at the top, you know? So
You just do it because you do it.
you do it for stylistic reasons. It does make your life a little bit more challenging, but in general, let me put it to you this way. You do not want to be in the position of the junior software developer whose senior software developer caught you putting the script tag at the bottom, right? You would get scoffed at minimum. And even worse, they might just go in and fix it for you. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Is assignment 2 Java or
That's a good question. Shall we take a moment to examine assignment 2, since we're on the topic? Oh, let me just enable those practices. So this one uses JQuery.
Java?
Yep, JavaScript and JQuery. Java is to JavaScript as car is to carpet. So, assignment 2. Most important thing is the due date, of course. Let's see here. What do we have for the due date? February 16th, which is about 2 weeks hence. 2 weeks less a day. So, learning objectives. 1. Create dynamic websites using JavaScript and jQuery. 2. Perform calculations and business logic using JavaScript control structures. Create event handlers to add interactivity to web pages. Manipulate the DOM to modify web page content. Perform client-side web form validation. and apply CSS to style website content. Requirements. Create a symptom checker at web application using Bootstrap and JavaScript. Using jQuery is recommended but not required. So jQuery will make things go simpler and easier, but if you don't want to use it, you're not required to. Bootstrap is the other thing we're covering this week. Select a general category of symptoms, i.e. coughing, headache, hip pain, other things that old people get, under which there are multiple possible causes. Your website should present a form that asks the user to follow-up questions about the symptom. For example, is the cough dry or productive? Now, having had a productive cough for the last 2 weeks, I can say, I'm not sure I would consider it, I'm not sure I would have used the word productive with respect to coughs of that nature. Phlegmy, I think I would have used, but anyway. Is the problem accompanied by X, Y, or Z symptoms? The goal of these follow-up questions is to narrow down the possible or likely causes of the symptoms. The form should incorporate the following elements. One, a text or numeric type input box, for example, the user's age, a question that is answered using radio buttons. Is the dry cough productive, or as it can be only one or the other, right? So remember that with radio buttons, someone in the other classroom is wearing a stupid hat, but they're also standing in front of the door. It looked like a birthday cake.
That's where it's there, I think. Looks like it's there, not that that's.
Must be another guy.
Whoever they are, they seem to be having a better time than we are. So remember, radio buttons are exclusive choices, right? So, not that I'm trying to lead anybody in any directions with respect to the particular disease. Once again, you get the choice of disease. But if you had, for example, cold symptoms, right? Coughing, sneezing, hacking, and wheezing, right? In theory, a person could be coughing, sneezing, hacking, and wheezing all at the same time, right? However, if you consider radio buttons, well, the example given here is a yes/no response, right? So, for example, have you been attacked by weasels in the past month? Yes or no? You either have been attacked by weasels or you have not been attacked by weasels, right? There's no, well, I had a bit of an encounter with a weasel. I encountered a weasel in the dark alleyway. The weasel either attacked you or it didn't. I'm not interested in whether the weasel threatened you, right? So, does that make sense? That's a lie. I haven't been attacked by a weasel in the last month. You must also ask a question requiring use of checkboxes, demonstrated here. You must also ask a question which is answered using a drop-down menu. For example, is the problem new, ongoing, or worsening? This is another example of sort of in this category where you ask a question that has one answer, right? Perhaps an example of this would be, where do you live? Down by the bay, where watermelons grow. Etc. Question?
Those drop-down menus, is it by default? Say if there's like a lot of options and you're selecting a country, if I click CA, it would break me down to CA invoice. Is that by default or is that?
They do that by default.
That's by you don't have to program.
No? Yeah, that's pretty good, right? Actually, like, okay, so I have a personal gripe now. Time for personal gripes with Dr. Moore. On the academic integrity form that I have to fill out when I charge someone with plagiarism, there's a drop-down list like this for me to select which program the student's in. Now, you may not know this, but like this college has a very stupidly large number of programs. Less recent, more recent, months, but still very large. And like it takes time to scroll the list, and it's even going to computers doesn't really help you, right? But each program has its own unique numeric code. If all they did was just swap, program name, program number, and made it program number, program name, I'd be able to search by number in that list and pull up the thing I wanted instantly, and it would save me seconds. It would save me minutes in the entire semester, But and you want to know what's interesting is like that kind of stuff actually does matter, Like consider how much time each professor wastes fumbling with that interface, right? If you take in aggregate, sure, every time I do it, it might cost me like 15 seconds, But if I convict quite a few people of plagiarism. So let's say, I've done like a typical kind of 30 students, let's say 32 to make the math easier, right? Let's say I convict 32 students in a semester, right? Which means at 15 seconds a pop, that's 8 minutes of my time that's just gone from flipping through a menu, right? Now multiply that by all of the number of profs at the institution, right? And like even just within the CSAC department, you've probably wasted like 4 or 5 hours at least. So across the entire organization, how many work days are lost and paid for by the institution collectively among all of the employees just because that's a bad interface? Probably a week of manpower lost just because that menu isn't searchable or effectively searchable, right?
It's just one example.
Yeah, like that kind of stuff. Okay, you want to know the truth?
Of course.
That is the kind of stuff that your managers out in the healthcare field will expect you to find and squash. That's the sort of efficiency they're looking for, right? Because like think about it this way, right? Oh man, there's this great XKCD chart. Yeah, this is the thing. So, is it worth the time? How long can you work on making a routine task more efficient before you're spending more time than you save? Right? Now, if it's a routine task that you do like several times a day, for example, if it's something you do 50 times a day, right? If you save 1 second doing that, if you can like improve the process so you save 1 second every time you do it, you're justified spending an entire day shaving that 1 second off, right? If it's something you do once a day, you can actually, if you shave a minute off of something you do daily, you are also justified spending an entire day doing so. You will get more time in the long run, right?
I just wasted all that time explaining it to us.
Yes, but maybe maybe you will like become more efficient people. Maybe I have made this species slightly more efficient now by having shown you that there is a trade-off and that shaving time off of routine tasks is actually useful.
I think they're in the office.
Yeah.
It's more than shop to save myself 2 minutes.
Exactly.
To explain to you.
Yes, precisely. Anyway, where were we? Yes, assignment 2. So, in summary, you must contain at least the following. You may have other ones as well if you choose. You must at least have a numeric input, a radio button input, checkbox input, drop-down menu. The form can incorporate additional input elements if you like. The form inputs should all be initially blank with no default values provided. The form should also include a submit button and a reset button. When the user clicks the reset button, all form elements should be made blank. Input text or number boxes should become blank, and radio buttons and checkboxes should all become deselected. When the user fills out the form, inputs and clicks submit, a possible cause should be presented to the user below the form. And the possible cause should be based on the input values provided. So basically, click certain combinations and it tells you, you might have scurvy, right? At least 3 different possible causes should be incorporated, and different form input values should lead to different possible causes being presented. So, depending on how you arrange your buttons, it could tell you you have scurvy, or scrofula, or some other disease that starts with the letter S. You are absolutely welcome to put more effort in than this, right? But this is your minimum requirement, okay? The text or number input, as well as the radio button, should both be considered required, even if, required in the sense that the form can't be submitted without them being filled in, right? Required fields. If either of these are not filled out, instead of displaying the possible causes of the symptoms, a warning alert should be displayed below the form, indicating that all required data has not been provided. So this is what we mean by form validation, right? Your JavaScript should check to make sure that at least these elements have been input by the user. Use Bootstrap to style your website. The form buttons, checkboxes, radio buttons, drop-downs, etc. should all be styled using Bootstrap. The possible causes can be presented how you like, however. Table, list, success alert box, whatever you please. It is okay to Google search symptom checkers for inspiration, but as always, the work submitted must be entirely your own. The medical correctness of the symptom checker will not affect the mark received. You are not doctors. But try to make correct associations between symptoms and other data collected and the possible causes. So, you know, I guess try to take it seriously in ways that I didn't when I was explaining it. Being attacked by weasels is perhaps not indicative of any particular medical condition. Although, well, yes, rabies, but rabies in the weasel would cause it to attack you, but rabies in you would not cause weasels to attack you, right? Smelling like weasel food might make weasels attack you, I'm not sure. Submission, the same way as the last one. Here's your mark breakdown. You can see there are quite a few categories. Any questions? Okay. Shall we have our break a little bit early then, since we're kind of between topics? Okay. In that case, we shall have a half-hour break. Please be back at 2:22 p.m. Class has resumed. So, I'd like to blast through the rest of this JQuery stuff. We only have a few more slides to go. And then we will talk about Bootstrap, which I think hopefully everybody finds to be like actually lightening the load of development work. So, I'd like to talk, we've talked about how to set up actions. We've talked about how to modify style properties. It's also useful to learn how to modify the contents of HTML tags. For this, we have 3 different actions which we may use to modify the contents of these items. The first is text, byid.text. This will modify the inner text property of an HTML component. Now, this means that you are not permitted to add additional HTML components in this way. You can't do this one, .html. You can see in this one we are set to this, we are setting something that includes paragraph tags. So if we use the HTML function, we are permitted to add additional HTML elements. Now, pardon me, this is not the preferred way of doing it. The preferred way of doing it is to use methods add children. We don't have time to get into it, unfortunately. But this is a way that you can expand and contract the DOM, the tree, with additional components or remove components entirely. For example, if we go here, if I take a look at the contents of let me add an ID to one of these. ID is equal to P1. There we go. P1. I have, they're all hidden, aren't they? There we go. they're still there, they're just hidden. So p1.html is all of that text. p1.text is in this case equal to the same thing. If we step one level up and examine the body, the body, you can see, includes not only all of the paragraphs, but also the heading as well, right? This is literally all of the HTML code that occurs inside of this specified element. Make sense? If we compare that to the text, what do you notice about the text versus the HTML? This is the text. This is the HTML. One of these things is not like the other. Yes?
The text doesn't have the tags like H2 and P.
Precisely so. Text does not contain the HTML tags. It's just the contents with no tags attached. So we can also set both text and HTML by providing an argument to the method. So let's say, not body, but p1 dot text will be hello, how's it going, friend? And there you have it. We modified the inner text of the element. Make sense? Question?
It's just temporary, right? If you refresh the page, you go back to normal.
Yes, if it is just temporary. If we refresh, what happens is the page goes back to the server, grabs a fresh new copy, and loads that instead. Well, it might be actually loading a cached copy, but normally it goes back to the server. It depends on the browser. Compare that to HTML, where we can add things like ordered list, list item, and list item, and ordered list. You can see that the HTML tags are accepted and rendered as HTML. This is not possible using .text. What .text will do is it will actually render the HTML tags as text in the web page instead of interpreting them as real tags. So to an extent, this one is safer. .text is safer. Let me show you something quickly called a cross-site scripting attack. Let's say that somebody, some nefarious person, said something like, hello, friend, but then script alert you being hacked, son. So basically, when you are writing elements into a page and they are being interpreted as elements, if the end user decides to put something like a script tag in there, the script tag will be encountered and executed by the browser as if it had arose from a legitimate place. The browser can't really tell the difference, right? It's doing it's doing its job. But, and you know, it's not so very impressive to do this from the JavaScript console, right? The problem comes when something like this has been taken in by the server and then echoed back again to the website. If that's the case, then something like a bad email link could execute strange and malicious JavaScript, which is how cross-site scripting attacks happen. Basically, the purpose of the phishing email, when you receive phishing emails, the purpose of that is to get you to click on a link, right? To trick you into clicking the link. Once you have clicked the link, something like this gets embedded into your website, right? Once that executes, by being integrated into the page, any number of things could happen. The malicious script could install a keystroke logger, which collects your username and password for whatever site it is, or just monitors your keyboard, monitors what you're doing and how you're using the web page. You can have session cookie hijacked in this way, where the attacker duplicates your valid login session, in which case, unless your website has very good protections against it, an attacker can get in, get all of your data, get out, change your password, steal your account basically, and if that's an account that has valuable stuff in it, that could be a problem.
So all this happens when you click the link that says you have been hacked?
Oh, is that one of the types of links that they use now? You have been hacked?
Yeah, click here.
Clever.
Yeah.
Clever. Yes. Yeah.
Close or like open.
Yes. So, here. I know we're supposed to be moving on to Bootstrap, but this is also very important information. So, let's imagine, all right, just for the sake of interest, we have someone's grandmother, all right? Then we have an evil hacker, all right? That's what all hackers look like. I'm an expert. So this is what happens, all right? The hacker sends an email to dear sweet grandma, right? Grandma is presented with an email that says, "You're fired. Click here." Right? So if you hover over that link, right, you'll get like a large amount of garbage. right? The link will be at least 3 lines long, right? Contain lots of characters that you don't recognize, including a lot of percent signs, typically, right? Now what that is that's a clever way of hiding a script tag, one of these, a script tag, doing something a lot more than just producing an alert box, right? But that, right, once clicked, gets sent to the server, right? And this is ultimately the server's problem, because what the server does is it takes a chunk of this and it integrates it into the web page, right? It integrates it into the web page as if it were actual real page elements, right? Which means that when this file is served to poor old grandma, this, which is actually a script attack like this, executes on grandma's browser, right? So that could do any number of things. That our evil hacker could use it to monitor her key presses, so that he has a record of what she hits and when. You can imagine if this was a bank, you know, you could get someone, like you have to enter your bank account card number and your password to get into your bank, right? So you can steal login credentials that way pretty easily. It does rely on the website having the vulnerability, and you know, you would assume banks wouldn't, but you shouldn't assume, right? Don't assume that the website that you're about to travel to is trustworthy and that therefore you can click on phishing links, right? The other thing that she could do, the other thing that he could do, the way that grandma communicates with the server to establish her own identity is by using cookies. Now, a cookie is just a string. We're going to talk about cookies when we do PHP, but cookies are just a string. What he can do is he can yoink the cookie. He can take a duplicate copy of the cookie, right? Which means that if grandma has her own session with the server, our hacker has that same session with the server because he's stolen the validation credentials, right? From there, if he acts quickly, he could change her account password, lock her out of her own account, do whatever he wants with it, right? It's a pretty serious problem. Cross-site scripting attacks are one of the most common web vulnerabilities because ultimately the problem is always humans. Once you've become sufficiently trained in the arts of cybersecurity, when you see a room, like when you see Mohawk College and people walking down the hallway, you don't see people walking down the hallway. What you see are a bunch of security vulnerabilities walking down a hallway. Each and every person is a security vulnerability because they can be convinced of things that aren't true, right? Like, for example, the phishing email that you mentioned, you have been hacked. It's like, if you click on that, you are certain to have been hacked.
Oh yeah, or like,
right?
there's 3 viruses on your phone. So sad.
One that I get, I'm not sure why, but one that I get a lot is, you have been approved for a grant.
For like a loan?
Not like a grant, no, like a bursary.
Oh.
Like, I don't know why, they must think I'm a student or something, because I keep getting approved for this student bursary. If you didn't apply for it, then you didn't get it, right?
Because your location is going to you.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, IP filtering is definitely a thing. But yeah, actually, okay, I'll admit something. All right, I'll make an admission. Oh, and LinkedIn, you'll get them from LinkedIn, like from LinkedIn, all the time if you're on LinkedIn. But I did click on one once.
What happened?
Well, it was interesting because like I knew there was something like a little fishy about it, as phishing emails go, because like it was pretending to be from Kentucky Fried Chicken, all right, and I was like, interesting, and it turned out that it was actually from IT. It was actually like someone had made a very, very convincing phishing email in IT, and in such a way that it didn't look like a usual phishing email. And they got me, and I was like, fair enough, guys. By the way, the thing to do, by the way, if you have clicked on one of those links, whatever it is that it brought you to, log out immediately. Log out immediately, shut down the browser. Okay, here's your procedure. 1, log out immediately. You may only have seconds.
Log out of the computer or like?
No, of the website. Log out of the website, you may only have seconds. If you have been subject to a cookie theft attack, if you log out your session, that also logs out his. Right? So if it's cookie theft, log out immediately. Number 2, go in and clear all your browser history. Right? Number 3, probably even in a different browser, all right? Log into the website, change your password, right? That's my advice. And change it to something that's not guessable from the first one. But you know, I have a whole diatribe on what constitutes a secure password, which I shall save for another day. Let's keep rolling, shall we? So, .val gives you the value in input types. So, you remember in one of the assignment requirements is that you have a button which resets all of the input values, right? Well, that line of code right there, if you leave the string blank, that will reset input fields. Okay? So that's for the assignment. Write that down. So, in addition to simply accessing your CSS properties directly, you may also add and remove and toggle CSS classes using add class, remove class, and toggle class. You would, of course, have to provide the classes that you were adding and removing. You can do that using JavaScript. Very good. And you can also chain actions together. So in this example, we're grabbing the first paragraph, ID P1, we change the color to red using CSS, and then immediately afterwards, we change the HTML to new text. All on one line, all very smooth. You pay a penalty every time you have to perform a search like this. So this is also more efficient from a programming standpoint. But It can also make the code look very messy if you do too much of this at one time. This is very, very powerful. One line of jQuery can do what the equivalent code in plain JavaScript would take many lines of code to do. This is probably the reason that jQuery is still so popular. Basically, each one of these actions is minimally one additional line of code. So it makes the entire code, the entire program much more compact. If it's more compact, then there are fewer places for bugs to hide out, but it also tends to make the lines themselves longer and more unwieldy. So, as always, it's a trade-off, but in general, people who program love saving keystrokes. If you can save them keystrokes, they'll use anything, all right? Any questions about that? Okay. jQuery plugins are additional libraries that depend on jQuery, offering new functionality. jQuery plugins exist for common things such as calendars, menus, and animation, but there's also really advanced stuff for it like facial recognition. So you have the ability to plug additional features in to your client-side code using jQuery plugins. We're not going to actually use any though. Standard vanilla jQuery is enough for us. Good. So, as an exercise, I would like you to take this code quickly and modify it so that we say at the same time that you're modifying the color to green, you are also making the text of the heading say hello world, and when read, goodbye cruel world. Okay? Using jQuery, you should be able to do this very quickly. When it says green, or when it changes green, make the title say hello world, and when it changes red, make it say goodbye world. The contents of the heading. people got it working? Okay. In the interests of time, I'm going to show you.
I got it working, but I use alert. I'm not sure if that works.
Not quite what I had in mind. So, let's use action chaining. So here, we are setting the color green. Here we are setting the color red. All we need to do, dot text, hello world, dot text, goodbye, cruel world. Reloading the page. Click, click, oh, whoa, whoa. Hmm. Let's see here. Oh, I got it. Once again, we have hit the problem where the page isn't loaded, but we're doing stuff. On this line, we're setting up a click event for H2 here. We load that click event here, we load H2 there. That's the wrong order, so that was the problem. We have to take this line and smush it up inside of our document ready. If we do that, everything works.
No, I don't have that problem.
Yep. Okay. All right. Bootstrap then. Let's move right along. Okay, Bootstrap. I'm going to try to get through the slides in the remaining hour of class, and then we can do examples tomorrow. Okay? So, Bootstrap was developed by Twitter, basically. So, they use it. Lots of people use it. So, Bootstrap is a front-end web development framework similar to JQuery. JQuery is trying to make JavaScript easier. Bootstrap is trying to make CSS easier. Developed at Twitter, formerly Twitter, to encourage consistency across internal tools. Released in 2011. Updated consistently since then, second most starred project on GitHub, very popular with web developers. So, examples. This is how you apply Bootstrap to HTML components. You do it by adding them to a set of predefined Bootstrap classes. So basically, when you load Bootstrap, you are provided with a bunch of class definitions, CSS rules targeting defined class names. All you need to do to apply those CSS rules is to put things in those predefined classes. BTN button, that is a predefined class for buttons as given in Bootstrap. So all you have to do is say class button, you get it styled like this. We then have a number of color themes which can be applied by using button dash and then the color theme you want. It kind of decides what these colors should be and expects you to live with it. So part of the whole shtick with Bootstrap is we have made some aesthetic decisions. If you don't like them, don't use Bootstrap, basically. Does that make sense? You can modify things to look, differently, the way that you want them. To an extent, once you're, if you're also using Bootstrap, you're kind of going to come into conflict with the Bootstrap rules, which, things might behave unpredictably. So, in general, it's good to stick to Bootstrap if you've started using it. So, for example, this warning button, button type, button, class, button, and button warning. So when you include multiple classes, you separate them with spaces in HTML. Warning. There you go. So, Bootstrap provides predefined CSS classes which allow us to style web apps in a common way. They also provide predefined components that provide some specific and special functionality. Typically, a set of CSS classes may be supported by JavaScript code, along with associated expectations around how they are to be used in HTML tags. So basically, the idea is standardization. We want standard approaches to how websites look. That's part of the idea behind Bootstrap. For example, drop-down lists, navigation bars, and pagination all have Bootstrap, sometimes Bootstrap JavaScript enabled components which you may use. Extensive example code and tutorials make it easy to integrate into our own applications. Pretty much every Bootstrap component has a W3 Schools page that you can lift code from, put it into your website. It's all open source, and it works most of the time anyway. Depends on what you've used. In general, on W3 Schools, the code examples are, this is how you use this component, right? It's not going to give you website content, and it's not arranging those components to form a page, right? So the code examples on W3 Schools are good. They don't give you too much to sort of push you into, oh, you just plagiarized your website off of W3 Schools. They're more like the code examples that you find in these types of slides. Does that make sense? Yes. Good. So, once again, in this course, we are skipping through this stuff pretty quickly, So we can't, I don't have the time to give you the full treatment on these things. So, I'm expecting you guys to use resources like W3 Schools to help put your websites together, right? Just don't do the plagiarism, okay? Don't lift actual websites in their entirety. Don't get them generated by the stupid chat bot. And the actual written text of for example, the article descriptions of your medical disease that you did for assignment 1, I am expecting you to have not lifted those from Wikipedia. right? Or any other internet source.
What do you mean? But you said we can just copy and paste and put the source. Is that what you did?
You can do that to an extent. Let's take a look at the assignment.
And are we required to do our own research too? It's on the top.
Okay, alright, so it does, yeah. Alright, you're not required to write anything.
I did write
I'm
some
mixing my classes up. In the other class, they're not to do that. Definitely bonus marks though if you wrote your own, and not actual bonus marks, but like you will have increased my estimation of you if you actually wrote your own stuff. Yeah.
By writing, you mean like rephrase?
No, I mean writing.
like researching the web.
We need to get information from the source, right?
Yes, I mean you read something,
Yeah.
right? You think about it, you then put it away, and you type out of your brain. That's what it means to do research, right? Paraphrasing something that you find on the internet is as bad as plagiarism, because, like, honestly, I could get an algorithm to do that. I don't need you to do that. The other thing is, if you have written it, perhaps you have something interesting to say that hasn't been said about it yet, right? Perhaps you have your own personal experiences you connected to, or perhaps you are a professional or attempting to be a professional in a field, and you have read a few different articles on the same topic, and you can draw information from across several articles, and Bletchley says this and Winberg says that, but I think the truth is closer to what Bletchley thinks, type thing, No, paraphrasing is not research. Copying text out of articles is not research. Research, you're not really doing research unless you've read through at least 6 or 7 different sources on a subject. And it's also, like, Googling is also not research, right? A monkey can Google things. You need to go out and find sources. Normally, you need to start in a library, right? Yeah. But of course, what do I know about it? I only have a PhD. If the research only took you 10 minutes, it's not research.
Obviously.
Yeah. So, so why might we use front-end frameworks? Well, first, it can vastly improve development time. Your boss is always going to want you to produce whatever it is as fast as possible, as your time to do something is what they are paying for, right? So, if you use tools which decrease the amount of time it takes you to do the same amount of work, not only will your boss be happy, but you will be more competitive in the job space than your contemporaries. you decrease the amount of time it takes you to do something by not reinventing the wheel and leveraging existing work. These are things that frameworks are quite good at. You can think of a framework, particularly one like Bootstrap, as being the codification of front-end design practice as practiced by people who know what they're doing, who have spent a long time analyzing these problems to arrive at good solutions. So you don't want to reinvent the wheel, and it's tricky, especially for you as students, because reinventing the wheel to an extent is how you learn to code, right? You don't know about all of the libraries that you have available to you, so what you end up doing is you end up re-implementing stuff that already exists more poorly than if you had just used the library. But unless you go through that phase of reinventing it and coming to an understanding of how it works, you're never going to, you'll always be very, very limited in your programming ability, right? Reliability is another good reason to use front-end frameworks. When a framework is popular, lots of people use it. When lots of people use a framework, it is easy to go somewhere like Stack Overflow, ask a question, and receive genuine assistance. This is a real factor. There are very rare languages out there that basically nobody uses, and good golly gosh, try to get any assistance from a forum on one of those things. Oh man. In my final years of my PhD, I submitted a bug for a program called Prototype Verification System, where it was doing something stupid with garbage collection over like certain file size limit. Anyway, it was kind of a their problem, not my problem kind of thing, so I filed the bug ticket the way that you're supposed to. You want to know how long it took them to get back to me about that bug? 4 years. And then they basically said that it wasn't actually a problem, Yes, because there's one guy that maintains that software and he's got other stuff to do, right? The software's crap anyways. It makes a difference, right? The size of the community makes a difference. You want to use software that a lot of other people use, right? Cross-compatibility. There are many, many different browsers, devices, and screen sizes. A little bit of assistance managing that complexity goes a long way. How can a small development team possibly test across all these possible combinations? Think about it, right? Think about a table, right? Along the top, you've got all of your known browsers. Microsoft Edge, Firefox, Chrome, Opera, what's the Safari? Safari is the Mac one? Safari, Brave, on, and on. Even if you took the 10 most popular browsers, right? That's along the top. Then, along the side, let's put operating systems. Microsoft, Mac, Linux. Under Linux, you have to do at least 4 or 5 main, under Linux, you'd have to do Debian-based, Ubuntu-based, Red Hat Enterprise-based, and then Arch-based as well. You'd have at least that many. Now, let's take this table and make it a 3-dimensional table. Let's add another dimension going that way, and that will be device size, one slice of that cube for every possible phone, tablet, and monitor. That is the space of devices and combinations that you have to test on to make sure everything's working. It's completely infeasible. A small team would never be able to do it. A small team would not even be able to would not have the money to buy the phones to test it on real hardware. Right? So what do? You rely on pre-existing solutions. Right? We have tested this software on all of these things and it works. Okay. Latest versions of Bootstrap ensure cross-compatibility to all of these different things. Make sense? Any questions? The framework, Bootstrap, and others, is tried and tested by millions of people and millions of combinations. So it is known to be well received. What you hack out yourself in an afternoon may not be. You can, even if you are an absolutely brilliant front-end developer, there are cases you're likely not aware of. Learnability and ease of use. Users are familiar with the interface components and styles from having recognized it before on Twitter and other websites. Some argue this is a bad thing for branding purposes, but for the most part this isn't true. Imagine how confusing it would be if every Windows app used completely different buttons, menus, and drop-downs. Right? So when it says learnability and ease of use, it means on the part of the end user. Right? If websites kind of consistently have a set of user interface components that they use, or a more consistent set of user interface components, then that just makes all of the websites that are like participating in that standard easier because people will have already seen that way of doing a website before. For me, I think a very good example of this, on a phone, you know how you have like this little thing like that button with the horizontal lines down, right? Because I'm an old boomer, I'm not actually a boomer, but for a lot of people in the room, I'm probably a boomer. Because I'm a boomer, it took me like having to see that a couple of times for me to realize, oh, that's a menu, right? It wasn't obvious to me that symbol meant menu, right? A lot of the time when, like in the past, when you had stuff like that, it would look like a little gear, right? You'd have like a little gear icon, which is for settings or something like that. But that's also not quite what this, like they still use that symbol. This is kind of a slightly different thing. It's like the global menu type thing, right? But a lot of mobile websites use that now, right? That's a standard component. People know what they're looking at when they look at that symbol now. They had to be trained on it, some more so than others. But, you know, now that I know that's what that means, the next time I look at another website that uses the same symbology, I know what that means. Another one is, which is kind of interesting, is this one. Right? You guys seen this one? Sometimes it's got a thing here. Hmm? It's a floppy disk, yes. Maybe I'm not doing it justice. Yeah. I think it maybe has a tick out of the one side or something. But interestingly, to the extent that we have like explicit save features anymore, like more and more as the years go on, like the save this please functionality is getting more and more hidden in programs. It's just kind of saving automatically in the background more and more. But this is still kind of universally. There you go, that's more like it. See, my problem was that I was being too literal. Mine is what it looks like when you take the slidey part off the bottom. But yeah, I mean, obviously the slidey part comes off. Oh man. Okay.
I think it was the circle that threw me off.
Yeah. Well, the circle's on the under. Okay. All right. So that's universally a save icon, even though it's been many, many years since floppy disks were used. Do you even remember floppy disks? You do? Yeah. So.
My dad worked at Terra Data. Like my earliest memory.
So, for some reason when I did a floppy disk, I decided to do like one of the actual old like 5.5-inch floppy disks. This is the one that most people remember, which is the 3.5-inch hardcover floppy disk. But if you slide this thing, then you're just left with this, which is the magnetic read surface. Oh yeah, man. Put them in right side up, copy a bunch of stuff, turn it upside down, put it in again, whole new disk, man. It's great. Floppy disks. Floppy disk. Exploded diagram. There you go. This is the anatomy of a floppy disk, right? You've got your two plastic shells, your actual magnetic disk, which is what the drive spins. You've got to have a liner so that it doesn't get scratched on the case. And then this guy, which goes back and forth, right, to protect the magnetic surface. And then you have a little thing in the top which protects the disk. You had a little toggle switch on that you could protect it. But all that it doesn't do anything physical to the disk. All it does is it tells the computer this is a write protected disk, don't write to it. And that's it. Right? But yeah, yep. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that if I Google save icon, right, it's all floppy disks. Everybody knows what that symbol means, even if they've never seen a floppy disk before, right? It's kind of like, phone icon, right? Like, when was the last time any of you used a phone that looked like that, right? When was the last time you had a receiver on a phone that looked like that, right? Yet, that is universally the symbol for making a telephone call, right?
Well, when you ask kids pick up a phone, they go like this. They go like this.
Yeah.
Pick up an iPhone or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you're sufficiently old, you do that, right? Banana phone. But yeah. Oh, man. But the thing is, if you tried to use the magic rectangle, right? that doesn't indicate a function. This indicates a function. That doesn't. So this has to be the symbol for a telephone, right? Because that's not a telephone, it's a lot of things, right? Yeah. Like, they even use the symbol for the banana phone on the magic rectangle, right? Good grief. Anyway, what I'm trying to get across is that there is utility in having a standardized visual interface. It means that people know how to use your software, right? This is a very old thing. It's been going on for some time. To some extent, it is the language you are communicating in. You are communicating in a visual language. So, okie dokie. Bootstrap. Let's get Bootstrap. So, please pay attention and write this down. This is the procedure for adding the Bootstrap framework to one of your HTML projects. You go to www.getbootstrap.com. There we go. There are two ways to do it. You can do it this way. If you're a Linux person who runs a server, which you're probably not. Any Linux people who run servers in the room? No? Okay. Use this one. So CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. It's a bit less secure, but essentially you are linking to remote resources. The user's browser will go out into the network to fetch the relevant copies of the libraries at load time. This is a bit different from what we did today with JQuery. With JQuery, we had to go out, manually download the file, save it locally. Here, we won't have to do that, we can just link to it. Okay? So, you copy. Pasta. And get the other one too. Copy. Pasta. There we go. Now, Bootstrap applies some interesting and subtle styling, not terribly subtle, but somewhat subtle styling, just by virtue of being loaded. So if you would all please remove your eyeballs from your computers, lift your eyes, and view this text. Everybody, I want your eyes up, 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 up. Look, look, look. I'm about to implement Bootstrap in 3, 2, 1. There you go. So, this looks perhaps a bit better. The font's changed, the padding has changed, the margins have changed. But interestingly, look what happens to the title when I slide the page around. Do you see how the heading is like getting slightly larger and smaller? That is a Bootstrap effect. One of them anyway. Make sense? So, all that's true, and our JavaScript is still running. Okay? So that's how you get Bootstrap.
Do you copy and paste it on the index HTML or?
Yeah, right into the head.
You have to
These two lines here have been copied and pasted from www.getbootstrap.com, where it says CDN, and there are two copy icons. There's another reasonably useful, reasonably universal icon, right? The clipboard icon. Although, how a clipboard became copy, I'm not quite sure. Oh, I suppose it would have been from carbon copies, right? You guys know what a carbon copy is? Okay.
Goes through the page.
That's right. So a carbon copy, you'll see this occasionally, they do still use them. So in fact, they like them in hospitals, actually. So carbon copy paper, let me bring it up.
So the email is called carbon copy too.
Yes, this is where CC comes from on an email. So basically, yeah, stuff like this. So on carbon copy paper, right? Essentially, there's like carbon embedded in the pages that when you press on it with a pencil, right, it will transfer the marks down through several pages, right? It's a way of being able to duplicate a document without, duplicate a handwritten document without having to like physically Xerox it or something, right? Carbon copy, that's what carbon copy means. Presumably this has some relation to clipboards. But yeah,
You take the notepad and you put it on a clipboard, as version.
exactly, right? I mean, put it this way. If someone is handing you like a carbon copy paper to fill out, you're either at a desk or they've given you a clipboard because the backing is necessary to make the carbon come through. Anyway. So you can also use the starter template. I don't know if I consider it necessary. Here you go, starter template. Includes all of the well, includes the CSS anyways. There's the JavaScript. I'm not sure why they didn't put that in the head. This is really not terribly advantageous in my opinion, versus just doing the Emmet abbreviation in VS Code and copying in the CDN. Basically, you get to the same place with a lot more gobbledygook comments going on that you don't need. So I wouldn't recommend using this, even though it's in the slides. Sorry, Kevin. I know, Kevin. You'd probably say something like, "Yeah, that's fine."
Just kidding.
Kevin's the guy who wrote this course.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin Brown. At some point, you will hopefully have the ability. You'll be able to take the course with him. He's quite good. So we will be using Bootstrap version 5 in this course. Versions 3 and 4 are still heavily used in industry and by employers. You'll still get you should be reasonably back compatible knowing version 5 though. Version 5 notably dropped the JQuery dependency. Lots of people are dropping JQuery dependencies. So basically, if you wanted to use version 3 or 4, you would have had to get jQuery anyways. The version doesn't matter too much. Version 6 will be coming along when it comes along. What matters is that you're consistent about the version number, right? So essentially, because 3 and 4 are still reasonably heavily used, if you just Google, how do I do X in Bootstrap, you might find that you're not getting the current version, right? So Google, let's say navbar in Bootstrap, right? Now, a lot of these say version 5, some of them don't. If we take a look, see here, that's from Bootstrap itself, you can see that the documentation from Bootstrap itself has given me which version? Version 4, not version 5. So you have to be very, very careful when you're Googling around for Bootstrap that you include the version number when you're Googling. If you include the version number when you're Googling, then you'll get the right version, but you should still check to make sure that you got the right version. Aids and tutorials for past and out-of-date versions of Bootstrap will be less helpful to you, all right? So make sure when you're looking up reference that you're looking up the right version, okay? Sound good? Because it's tricky. It's easy. It's an easy mistake to make. So we talked about flex boxes, and we talked about grid in CSS. Would it interest you to know that Bootstrap has a way of doing responsive design which combines both approaches in an easy way that does not require you to do even a single CSS rule? Have I piqued your interest? We have the Bootstrap grid/container system. Let me give you a demonstration. So, containers are divs, all right? To make a Bootstrap container, we make a div, put it in class container, and put everything that needs to be inside of that inside of that. There you go. Class container. While I'm at it, I'm just going to add a quick little inline, a quick little style block. There we go. Just giving the div a border so that we can see it. Border, 2 pixels, solid black, or dash gray. Give it margin 2 pixels, and give it padding 2 pixels as well. There we go. Reloading the page. You can see this is the div that I just added in. All of the content is inside of it. So what's interesting is that this container has, we have now implemented responsive design. if I pull this across, did you see that? Did you see how that jumped? At very wide screen widths, I have these regions where the margins will grow and shrink, but the sort of web page region itself will remain of a fixed width until I can no longer accommodate that width, and then boop, we go to the next size down. This will now be fixed, and margins will change while I'm sort of decreasing size in this region until boop, we now hit the final breakpoint. You can see that the margins have been removed entirely, and we now have a full width div, right? And that remains full width for the rest of it. So this is, and if we view this in iPhone mode, for instance, refresh. It's interesting. It should be doing it. I'm not sure why it's not. Weird. Anyway. So the fact that it's hitting these breakpoints automatically makes this a responsive design that will look good at any width. And all we had to do was just this much work. You can imagine how much of a pain in the arse that would be to do manually, right? Further, the system has a grid/table system, which we can use to for similar effects, to set up columns, basically. So if we create a new div in class row, we can then create columns. And we can take these paragraphs, put them inside of them. There we go. Reloading the page. Now I have side-by-side column layout very quickly, very easily. Now, the default, if you don't specify column width is out of 12, by the way. If you don't specify column width, it will divide the space among your columns evenly. But let's say that you wanted to do an asymmetrical column layout. If I say -3 here, I get 3 units across here and 9 units across there. You'll see, perhaps if you squint at it, you can see that this is 1, 2, 3, right? So you can also use this for interesting things like nav bars. Somebody give me a type of fruit.
Starfruit.
Star fruit. I see we have a Stardew Valley player in the crowd.
You know, I played that game so much that in my head it didn't recognize that it's not a real fruit.
Papaya?
Yeah, I thought it was like fruit.
There we go. Star fruit is a real fruit though.
Okay. See, you confused me. I do play a lot of Stardew Valley now.
Yeah, but
so as soon as you said
Star-
that, I was like,
Star fruit is the highest value fruit.
Yes.
Yeah. What's another one? Fruit? Apple, okay. Tomato. How about a controversial one that a lot of people don't realize is a fruit? Cucumber. Pear.
Cucumber is a fruit?
Yes, it contains seeds. That's the definition.
I mean, all squash are fruit.
Yep.
Zucchini and
Banana.
Banana, yes. Banana is technically a type of berry.
What?
Yep,
They call it banana berry.
yep. Give me two more. Grape. There we go. And one more. Kiwi. There we go. So you can see that the grid system has accommodated each of these things, but as we shrink the size, they get stacked up in a very good way. And it's also respecting the size of the contents of the div. If we squash it down far enough, you see? That's a bit of a small resolution. And perhaps if somebody is viewing it at this web resolution, they should stop viewing web pages on their Apple Watch. But still, you can see it's stacked them up in a very nice and still mobile-friendly manner, even though it doesn't look very good down here. That's just because we need to set the manual breakpoint. Column 3 dash small. Set the small breakpoint on that. Boop, there we go. And now it looks good. So that's another thing about these, is that, like, for mobile design, things that are side by side generally don't look very good as things become very squashy. Bootstrap can help that as well. Any questions? We will do more work tomorrow. Thank you very much for your time and attention, folks.